America is a country built on stories of unexpected encounters, of chance meetings that turn ordinary days into something unforgettable. Maybe that's why so many people deep down hope that in the most unlikely moment, the right person will come along and change everything. This is the story of Daniel, a man whose life had always been about hard work and honesty. No silver spoons, no shortcuts. Daniel lived in suburban Texas, in a modest one-bedroom house passed down from his grandfather. His days began at 5 a.m. with strong black coffee in a chipped mug and the local country station humming on the old kitchen radio. By sunrise, he was on the road in his rusty pickup, heading to another day of landscaping work in the upscale neighborhoods of the city's north side. Daniel didn't mind his humble life. He found peace in routine, beauty in the green world he tended. Where others saw chores, he saw hope. Flowers were a promise, trees were old friends, every weed a small challenge to overcome. Son, you work with your hands, but love with your heart. That's the only way things grow right, his grandpa used to say. Every so often, as Daniel trimmed boxwoods or reset stone paths, he'd watch expensive sedans glide past. He never envied the suits and sunglasses, but sometimes wondered what it might be like not to worry about bills at the end of the month, or to travel somewhere far just for the heck of it. But each time, he'd shrug it off. Gratitude was easier than dreaming about things out of reach. Elizabeth lived in another world, a world of bright lights. Power lunches and calendars so packed they left little room for life's small joys. Headquartered in the heart of Dallas, her tech firm was the talk of town. Her name was on glossy magazine covers and on the lips of up-and-coming entrepreneurs eager to follow her path. At only 33, she was a rising star in a world dominated by old money and even older traditions. But for all the accolades, Elizabeth's life felt hollow after hours. Her luxury high-rise apartment was breathtaking, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweep of downtown city lights. But the silence inside could be overwhelming. Friends came and went, with networking drinks, with business proposals, with congratulations every time her company outperformed the last quarter. Yet when the doors closed, Elizabeth was alone with the echo of her own ambitions. Relationships, they'd all fizzled out or faded away, never surviving the demands of her schedule, or maybe, she sometimes mused, her inability to believe that someone could love Elizabeth. The person instead of Elizabeth, the CEO, one late September afternoon. As summer gave way to cooler days and the scent of rain, Elizabeth decided she'd had enough of staring at her neglected rooftop garden. She wanted something beautiful, a place to read or share a glass of wine. Her regular gardener's schedule was full, so her building's doorman, always eager to help, recommended Dan, a guy with a real gift for turning tired spaces into living masterpieces. When Daniel knocked, Elizabeth was running late, hair in a sleek bun, designer laptop bag slung over her shoulder, phone pressed to her ear, giving last-minute instructions to her assistant. Their eyes met for a second. Daniel saw in her a mix of exhaustion and intensity. Elizabeth caught a glimmer of quiet confidence behind mud-stained jeans and calloused hands. Sorry, running to a meeting. Can we talk details tomorrow? She asked quickly, then added, the place needs a miracle. Daniel smiled. I can do miracles. Just need a little sun, a little time, and someone who loves flowers. Elizabeth nodded, not really listening, but something about his calm voice stuck with her throughout her meeting. Unbeknownst to either of them, the tiniest seed of curiosity had just been planted. That night, Daniel sketched out plans for the rooftop. Wildflowers for color, a small corner bench climbing ivy for privacy. He thought of Elizabeth's hurried energy and wondered what it might take to slow a person like her down enough to notice the world blooming around her. And Elizabeth, over a dinner from her favorite delivery spot, found herself glancing out the window at her rooftop, picturing what it would look like brought to life. She'd known wealth, admiration, adventure, but maybe what she needed now was something real, something she couldn't buy. If you ever dreamed that love might find a way when you least expect, if you believe there's a miracle waiting somewhere in the ordinary, Keep watching, because this is the story of what happens when two lives as different as night and day stop just for a moment and really see each other. If you're moved already, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Up next, the encounter that changed everything for Danielle and Elizabeth. Vou seguir exatamente neste estilo, narrativo, emocional, detalhado e com contexto cultural americano em cada bloco. Você terá um roteiro pronto para narrar, com tempo de tela e engajamento ideal para o público dos Estados Unidos. 3 days later, Elizabeth was feeling restless. Her morning meeting ran short, and the air was clearer than usual, a perfect fall day in Dallas. She took the elevator to her rooftop, half expecting more of the same neglected planter boxes and sad, sunburned shrubs. But Daniel was there ahead of schedule. He hadn't just set his tools to the side. He'd started rearranging her garden, humming softly to a classic John Denver tune, something about sunshine and country lanes. Rays of sunlight played off his face as he knelt by the planter, wiping sweat from his brow. Elizabeth watched from the doorway for several minutes, unnoticed. Instead of acting like hired help, Daniel moved with a gentle purpose, savoring every small success. A rosebush perked up by his careful pruning, a cluster of wildflowers coming back to life. There was an ease and confidence to him she found oddly calming. She finally stepped outside, trying not to sound too awkward. "Work music, huh?" Daniel looked up, offering a warm, open smile. "Music helps plants grow," he said, half kidding, half serious. "Helps me too," Elizabeth grinned, encouraged. "Can I make you something? Coffee, water?" "Actually, a lemonade would hit the spot," Daniel replied, surprised at her offer. He typically blended into the background, invisible to clients except for the bill at the end, while Elizabeth prepared 2 fresh lemonades, pausing to check her phone, resisting the urge to reread her emails. She realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd made anything for someone without expecting something in return. They sat together on a faded deck chair, sipping quietly. Daniel's hands were earthy and strong, but his manners were gentle. "So why landscaping?" Elizabeth asked, keen to know what was behind this easy-going presence. Daniel hesitated but answered with honesty. "After my folks died, my granddad showed me life wasn't about big wins, just small ones every day. He loved gardens, taught me that whatever you take care of will take care of you." Elizabeth nodded slowly, taking it in. Corporate America never talked that way. The language of her world was results and efficiency, not nurturing. For some reason, she found herself opening up, telling Daniel about her own childhood. Her dad had been a busy surgeon, always traveling. Her mom managed charity events, but never had time for much else. She'd spent her childhood in luxury, but rarely felt truly seen. They laughed about the quirky ways plants pick their owners, swapped stories about high school jobs. Daniel had worked at a feed store, Elizabeth at a coffee shop for the experience. Daniel spoke with quiet pride about turning dusty lots into gardens kids could play in, about teaching older folks to grow tomatoes for the first time. In that light, Elizabeth felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of connection, shorn of pretense or status. When they returned to the planter boxes, Daniel offered to let her help. He coached her through planting a row of marigolds, guiding her hands. Dirt caked under her nails, but instead of shame, she felt a childlike thrill, making something grow together. As the afternoon faded, Daniel packed his tools. Before leaving, he gifted her a pot of homegrown basil. "Good for pasta or just about anything," he joked. "Plants are like relationships. Give them patience and attention, and they'll surprise you." Elizabeth smiled, feeling oddly lighter. Alone that evening, she brewed tea with Daniel's basil and let herself imagine a life with more meaning. More color, more moments like today, tomorrow. She'd invite him back, not just for the garden, but for the possibilities growing between them. Over the following weeks, Elizabeth's rooftop became a sanctuary, her favorite part of the city, and the only place she didn't feel compelled to perform. She started coming home earlier, eager to see what new flowers Daniel had planted. slipping out of her business heels and into sneakers to join him outside. It didn't take long for their easy partnership in gardening to blossom into something more. Daniel started bringing her coffee from the local diner, always black, just as she liked it. Elizabeth responded with simple homemade treats: banana bread, iced tea, little gestures she'd never made for anyone at work. Their friendship grew as steadily as the marigolds, deepening with every shared laugh and afternoon spent talking as the sun set behind downtown. One Saturday, Elizabeth cancelled her usual brunch plans to spend the day working beside Daniel. The air was crisp, and the city felt oddly distant, a backdrop rather than the star of her life. Daniel taught her to water with care, not haste, how to inspect leaves for pests, and how to transplant seedlings with a gentle touch. She confessed, "I'm not good at slowing down. My whole life is about getting to the next level, doing everything faster, bigger, better. Being here, growing things, I feel like I finally belong somewhere." Daniel looked up, smiling. "Gardens teach patience. You can't rush them no matter how busy you get. The only deadline here is sunset." That day, Elizabeth lost herself in the rhythm of the work, her hands caked with dirt, her hair pulled back, her phone silenced and forgotten. They planted a patch of sunflowers, laughing as the wind kept knocking the seedlings from her grip. Later, sitting side by side on the old swing Daniel had hung for her, the conversation turned from gardens to dreams. Daniel shared memories of his grandfather, who'd come to Texas from Kentucky after the war with nothing but a bag of seeds and the belief that growing things brought hope. Grandpa used to say, "Life's got roots and seasons, setback and surprise. Same as a garden. Lose your patience, you lose your harvest." Elizabeth found herself opening up about her loneliness, the pressure to succeed, the feeling of being a stranger in her own life. "Sometimes I wonder what I traded for all this success," she confessed. "I have everything, but sometimes it feels like nothing at all." Daniel reached for her hand, grounding her in that moment. "You're not alone, Liz. You deserve someone who sees who you really are, not just your job, your title, or your address." "I see you." Her heart raced. In that golden hour, with the light filtering through the tall grass, Elizabeth realized she hadn't felt this safe in years. "Daniel," she whispered, voice trembling, "you make me feel like I finally have a home." He squeezed her hand, feeling hope bloom inside him. "You are home here, with me." Before the evening ended, their connection deepened into something undeniable. Elizabeth leaned in, and Daniel met her with a soft, true kiss, a promise not of perfection, but of growth, acceptance, and hope. Even as they shared that moment, both knew the world beyond the rooftop wouldn't let them have peace so easily. But for now, the garden sheltered them. Tomorrow would be another day, and they'd face it together, rooted in the possibility of love that was just beginning to flower. Elizabeth's happiness felt fragile but precious, like holding a butterfly. For 3 weeks, she and Daniel existed in their own world. Afternoons on the rooftop, evenings talking until the stars appeared over Dallas. Weekends spent discovering farmers' markets and quiet coffee shops where nobody knew her name or cared about quarterly reports. But reality has a way of crashing back in, and it started with Jessica, Elizabeth's college roommate and closest friend. Jessica worked in PR for high-end clients, lived in Highland Park, and knew everyone worth knowing in Dallas society. When she showed up unannounced on a Thursday evening, Elizabeth was caught completely off guard. Surprise! Jessica called, letting herself in with the spare key. "I brought wine and gossip." "Oh my God, Liz, what happened to your nails?" Elizabeth looked down at her hands, still slightly stained from repotting herbs that morning, and felt a flush of embarrassment. "I've been gardening." "Since when do you garden?" Jessica laughed, pouring herself a glass of Chardonnay. "That's what landscapers are for." "Speaking of which, who's the cute guy I saw leaving the building?" He looked rustic. Elizabeth's stomach dropped. "That's Daniel. We're seeing each other." The wine glass paused halfway to Jessica's lips. "Seeing each other? Like dating? The landscaper?" "His name is Daniel," Elizabeth said more firmly. "And yes, we're dating. He's wonderful, Jess. He makes me happier than I've been in years. Jessica set down her glass and grabbed Elizabeth's shoulders. Honey, I need you to think about this rationally. You're a CEO. You have a reputation, clients, investors. What happens when this gets out? And it will get out. Dallas isn't that big. I don't care what people think, Elizabeth replied, but even as she said it, doubt crept in. Maybe you should, Jessica said gently. I'm not trying to be mean, but this could hurt your business, your personal brand, everything you've worked for. Is a fling really worth risking all that? After Jessica left, Elizabeth couldn't shake the conversation. She tried to focus on work the next day, but whispers followed her through the office hallways. Someone had seen her and Daniel at the farmer's market, holding hands and laughing over heirloom tomatoes. The story spread like wildfire during a critical presentation to potential investors, a tech conglomerate worth millions. The managing partner made a cutting remark that silenced the entire room. I hear you've been slumming it with the help. Elizabeth, he said with a cold smile. I hope he knows more about growing businesses than he does about growing grass. The room went dead quiet. Elizabeth felt her cheeks burn, but something fierce ignited inside her. Daniel is the most honest, hardworking man I know. If my personal life bothers you, maybe we're not a good fit for business either. She walked out, knowing she'd just blown $1 million deal. But for the first time in her professional life, she felt proud of standing up for what mattered. That evening, Daniel immediately saw the pain in her eyes. Without asking questions, he wrapped her in his arms and let her cry out all the frustration and hurt. They're so cruel, Elizabeth sobbed. They judge you without knowing you, judge us without understanding what we have. I don't know how to fight this. Daniel felt his heart breaking. He'd always known this day would come, had seen other relationships crumble under the weight of class differences and social pressure. Liz, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not good enough for your world. I never want to be the reason you lose everything you've built. Don't you dare, Elizabeth said fiercely, pulling back to look him in the eyes. You're not dragging me down. You're lifting me up. They're the ones who don't understand what's important. She took his hands in hers, feeling the calluses that told the story of his honest work. I choose you, Daniel, not because it's easy, but because it's right. I choose love over fear, truth over appearances. I choose us. Daniel searched her eyes and saw steel there, a determination he'd never witnessed before. In that moment, he knew Elizabeth was stronger than either of them had realized. Strong enough to weather any storm, as long as they faced it together. But the hardest test was still to come. The months following Elizabeth's public stand were brutal. Word of her relationship spread through Dallas business circles like a wildfire in August. Former clients canceled contracts, citing concerns about leadership judgment. Invitations to charity galas and networking events stopped coming. Even her own employees began treating her differently, some with pity, others with barely concealed judgment. The breaking point came on a grey November morning when Elizabeth's phone rang at 7 a.m. It was her Uncle Robert, her father's older brother, and the closest thing to a parent she'd had since her father died 5 years earlier. Robert owned 3 successful oil companies across Texas and had helped launch Elizabeth's career with his connections and advice. Elizabeth, we need to talk. My office today at noon? This is serious. Robert's downtown office occupied an entire floor of the most prestigious building in Dallas. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the walls were lined with photos of him shaking hands with governors, senators, and oil executives. Elizabeth had always felt small in that office, but today she felt absolutely tiny. Sit down, sweetheart, Robert said, his voice gentle but firm. I love you like my own daughter, you know that. That's why I'm having this difficult conversation. Elizabeth braced herself. Your relationship with this landscaper is destroying your professional reputation and embarrassing our family. Yesterday, I had lunch with Jim Crawford from Crawford Industries. He asked if you were going through some kind of breakdown. 3 major investors have pulled out of deals specifically because they question your judgment. Robert leaned forward. his weathered hands folded on the massive oak desk. "I have a solution. There's a young man I want you to meet, Brad Wilson, Executive Vice President at Wilson Energy. Good family, solid business sense, recently divorced. He's interested in meeting you." Elizabeth felt sick to her stomach. "Uncle Robert, hear me out," he continued. "End this thing with the gardener, give Brad a chance, and I'll personally guarantee that every contract you've lost comes back. Plus, I'll bring you 3 new deals worth more than your entire company's current value." The office fell silent, except for the hum of central air conditioning. Elizabeth stared out at the city skyline, thinking about Daniel pruning roses in the morning sun, about the peace she felt in his arms, about the laughter they shared over simple dinners on her rooftop. "What if I say no?" she asked quietly. Robert's expression hardened. "Then you're on your own. I can't keep supporting someone who's determined to throw away everything our family worked to build. The Wilson name means something in this state, Elizabeth. Don't drag it through the mud for some temporary infatuation." Elizabeth left that office, feeling like she'd been hit by a truck. She sat in her car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, crying until her makeup ran. Everything she'd built, her company, her reputation, her financial security, her family's approval, was being held hostage for the price of Daniel's love. When she finally made it home that evening, Daniel was waiting on the rooftop, tending to the last of the fall flowers. He took one look at her face and dropped his gardening gloves. What happened? Through tears, Elizabeth told him everything, every cruel word, every threat, every ultimatum. Daniel listened in silence, his heart breaking with each detail. When she finished, Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that showed the true size of his heart. "Elizabeth," he said softly, "I can't let you lose your family and your life's work because of me. Your uncle is right. I'm just a landscaper. You deserve someone who can give you the world, not someone who might cost you everything. Daniel, look, I love you too much to watch you sacrifice everything for me," he continued, tears in his eyes. "Maybe we're just from different worlds. Maybe this was always going to end this way," but Elizabeth surprised them both. She stood up, wiped her tears, and looked Daniel straight in the eye with a strength that came from somewhere deep inside her. "You're right about one thing," she said. "I do have to make a choice. And I choose you, not because it's easy, because it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I choose love over security, truth over convenience, happiness over approval." She took his hands in hers. "I'm selling everything, Daniel. The company, the apartment, all of it. We're starting over somewhere new, somewhere we can build a life that's ours, not theirs." Daniel stared at her in amazement. "Are you sure? You could lose everything." "I already lost everything when I thought I might lose you," Elizabeth replied. "Now I'm going to gain the only thing that really matters, a life with meaning, with the man I love." That night, under the stars and surrounded by the flowers they'd planted together, Elizabeth and Daniel made the biggest decision of their lives, to leave Dallas behind and build something beautiful from scratch. Leaving behind Dallas was no small thing. Elizabeth spent her last days in the city, organizing paperwork, wrapping up contracts, and meeting with lawyers. She sold her company shares and her high-rise apartment, ignoring the silent judgments of bankers and brokers who couldn't understand her choices. Some friends tried to talk her out of it. Most just faded quietly away. Daniel was by her side for every step. With the money she'd saved and Daniel's modest nest egg, they bought a small property in the Texas Hill Country. A few acres of rolling land with an old farmhouse, a barn, and enough rich soil to build their dream. The first morning on the land, Elizabeth took a deep breath. The air was fresher, the sunlight softer. Instead of skyscrapers or honking horns, she heard birds and the distant sound of a neighbor's tractor. Setting up their new life was an adventure. The farmhouse was far from luxurious. Creaky floors, chipped paint, low ceilings, and a backyard that needed a year's worth of care. But for Elizabeth, it was the most beautiful home she'd ever had. Daniel built a swing under a big oak tree, just like the one on her old rooftop. And together, they planned every inch of their future garden. Elizabeth poured her energy into building a new business with Daniel, a landscaping company for local farms and small businesses. She developed workshops for gardening novices and hired high school kids after school to help plant flowers and vegetables. Daniel taught everyone personally, sharing techniques he'd learned from his grandfather and adding new ideas Elizabeth brought from her business experience. The first few months were hard. They worked from dawn till dusk, often tired and unsure if anyone would ever want their services. Money was tight, and sometimes Elizabeth missed her old kitchen. But every evening, as the sun set over the fields, she felt whole in a way she never had before. The couple quickly became beloved in the small town. Their homegrown vegetables won ribbons at the county fair. Their workshops drew neighbors from miles around. When senior Mrs. Evans came to every class and became like family. She'd say, "Y'all show what real love looks like. You've built something more valuable than any high-rise." 1 year after moving, Elizabeth woke up one spring morning to Daniel preparing breakfast in the garden. A simple feast of omelets, fresh berries, and pastries from the local bakery, with wildflowers on the table. "What's the occasion?" she asked with a smile. Daniel knelt in front of her beside the rose bush they'd planted together. He opened a small wooden box carved from local cedar, a simple silver ring with a blue sapphire, the stone from his grandmother's old brooch. "Elizabeth Wilson," he said, voice filled with emotion, "a year ago you gave up everything for our future. Will you be my wife, my partner, my home forever?" Elizabeth didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, "forever." As they hugged amid the flowers, Elizabeth realized this was the life she'd always wanted, filled with meaning, love, and hope. She'd traded status for happiness, luxury for peace, and a city skyline for open skies and hearts wide open. Their wedding, held the next autumn under the giant oak tree, brought together the town and old friends who came to see the miracle for themselves. No diamonds, no designer dresses, just laughter, music, and the promise of a future grown together from the richest soil of all. 2 years after their simple wedding, Elizabeth and Daniel's farm had become a true landmark in the community. The old farmhouse, once tired and faded, now brimmed with life. Their workshop calendars filled up months in advance, and their gardens grew vegetables and flowers for families up and down the valley. Neighbors came by not just for plants, but for advice, friendship, and sometimes a bit of the magic that seemed to surround their home. Elizabeth found fulfillment in the everyday magic, watching children's faces light up as they dug their first carrots, sipping coffee with Mrs. Evans as the sun rose, teaching couples to nurture tomato plants as they learned to nurture each other. Where once her days were measured in conference calls and contract wins, now they were measured in laughter, small victories, and a sense of belonging far deeper than status. Daniel, too, felt transformed. He'd always imagined he'd be a quiet gardener, tending to backyards no one thought much about. But with Elizabeth by his side, he was a teacher, a builder, and the beating heart of a place that brought people hope. His ideas for sustainable farming spread to other towns. Families came from hours away to learn how to grow food in harmony with the land. For the first time, he looked at what they'd built together and knew he'd made a difference. One day, as Elizabeth was leading a workshop for seniors in the barn, she saw Jessica, her longtime friend from Dallas, walk in. Uncertain but hopeful, after the class ended, Jessica admitted, "Liz, I was wrong. When you left, I thought you were making the biggest mistake of your life. But looking at you now, at this life you built, I realize I've spent too long chasing approval and success that didn't make me happy. You built everything I ever wanted but couldn't see." Elizabeth embraced her friend. "I had to lose almost everything I thought mattered before I could find what really did. Out here, life is simple, but it's full every day." Daniel joined them, his smile as honest as ever, inviting Jessica in for lunch. Together, they sat under the old oak talking, sharing homemade food and stories about how far they'd all come. As the day faded into twilight, the farm glowed with lantern light and the promise of another season. Elizabeth looked around at this world she'd helped build, a patchwork of gardens, laughter, and love, and felt a wave of gratitude. "We didn't choose the easy path," she said to Daniel, her voice gentle but strong. but we chose the right one. We gave up luxury, but we gained a life, one rooted in love and meaning. Daniel squeezed her hand. The world thinks success means more money, more power, more things. But real success is living every day true to yourself and sharing love where it matters most. For Elizabeth and Daniel, the simple choice had turned into the greatest adventure, a story of two hearts finding home in each other and planting seeds of hope in everyone they touched. If this story moved you, like and share it with someone who needs to remember that love will always find a way, no matter the odds. See you in the next chapter, where every ending is just the start of something real.